Welcome back to the Cheating Tales Lab. First of all, a huge thank you for helping us reach 5,000 subscribers. Thank you all for your amazing support. To celebrate, we're launching our second channel, Infidelity Tales Lab, where you'll get one-day early access to all our stories plus exclusive, original cheating wife stories you won't find anywhere else. You can subscribe now by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment, or simply search for Infidelity Tales Lab on YouTube. Don't miss out. Subscribe and listen to exclusive stories. You won't regret subscribing. Now let's begin the story. Jeffrey Anderson's Mercedes glided smoothly down the suburban streets of Rochester on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The structural engineer gripped the steering wheel with steady hands, proud of completing the Detroit project ahead of schedule. 20 years of dedication had earned him a reputation for excellence in his field. Every bridge, building, and foundation he designed stood as a testament to his unwavering commitment to perfection. At 45, Jeffrey embodied success earned through relentless determination. His tall, athletic frame spoke of pre-dawn workouts that kept him sharp and focused. Steel gray eyes that missed no detail had caught countless potential structural failures before they became catastrophes. The same attention to detail had helped him build what he thought was a perfect life for his family. The two-story colonial home came into view, its manicured lawn and pristine exterior reflecting the orderly life Jeffrey had constructed. His wife Annie's red BMW sat in the driveway alongside Michael's used Civic, a deliberate choice by Jeffrey to teach their eldest responsibility despite their comfortable means. The absence of the usual weekend sounds, Nathan's video game victories, or Emma's violin practice, struck him as unusual. He pulled his briefcase from the trunk, satisfaction coursing through him at the signed contracts inside. The Detroit shopping complex would add another successful project to his firm's portfolio. The prospect of surprising his family with his early return lifted his spirits after the long drive. The side door opened silently. Jeffrey believed in maintaining everything in his domain to the highest standard. No squeaking hinges or loose floorboards would ever compromise the integrity of his home. The house felt still, though he knew at least Annie and Michael were home. Voices drifted down from the second floor as he crossed the foyer. Jeffrey moved toward the stairs when Annie's words froze him mid-step. The paternity test came back. Annie's voice carried a tone of smug triumph that seemed alien coming from the woman he'd known for 18 years. None of the 3 kids are your dad's. Once he pays off your college fees, we'll tell him at your graduation. Then I'll take the house and his assets in divorce. The world crystallized into sharp focus. Jeffrey stood motionless, his mind processing the implications with the same analytical precision he applied to structural stress points. Mom, are you sure about this? Michael's voice wavered with uncertainty. He's always been there for us. Oh, please. Annie's laugh cut through the air like breaking glass. Jeffrey's been nothing but a convenient provider. So focused on his precious career. So proud of taking care of everyone. He never questioned why I spent so much time with Walter. Men like your father are easy to fool when they think they're in control. Jeffrey's mind raced back through the years. Walter Wiley, their family doctor, his supposed friend, the man who delivered all 3 children. Countless dinner parties, golf games, and family celebrations took on a sinister new light. But what about Emma and Nathan? Michael's question echoed Jeffrey's thoughts. They both look up to Dad so much. They'll adjust. Annie dismissed their younger children's feelings with casual cruelty. Walter's their real father anyway. We'll have more than enough money after the divorce settlement. Jeffrey's new contracts will fund quite a comfortable life for us. Walter says everything's set up perfectly, Annie continued, her voice thick with satisfaction. We've been planning this for years. Your father's so predictable. Always at work, always trusting, always playing the devoted family man. He's built us such a nice life to step into once we're rid of him. The conversation continued, each word revealing deeper layers of betrayal. Annie detailed years of deception, coordinated medical appointments that were covers for their meetings, careful manipulation of mutual friends, and systematic exploitation of Jeffrey's long work hours. Jeffrey remained still, absorbing every detail. The structural engineer in him recognized the elaborate framework of lies that had been constructed around him. Every business trip he'd taken to provide for his family had been an opportunity for their betrayal. Every late night at the office pushing to complete projects had given them time to strengthen their deception. Walter's taken care of everything at the medical practice. Annie's voice dripped with admiration for her lover's cunning. All the records support our story. Jeffrey won't be able to challenge anything once we reveal the truth. His reputation for being so straight-laced and proper will work against him. No one will believe he didn't know. The conversation shifted to their plans for after the revelation. Annie spoke of trips they'd take with Jeffrey's money, how they'd redecorate the house once it was hers, how their social circle would adjust to the new reality she and Walter had orchestrated. Jeffrey finally moved, his steps silent as he retreated to his study. The family photos lining the hallway showed scenes from a life he now understood was an elaborate production. Annie's wide smiles at family gatherings, Walter's casual arm around her at barbecues, the children's school events where both men had attended as father and family friend. Each image now revealed its hidden story. He sat at his desk, surrounded by the certificates and awards from his engineering career. His success, built on precision and careful analysis, had made him an attractive target. Annie and Walter had used his dedication against him, counting on his long hours and trusting nature to hide their affair. The irony struck him. The structural engineer who specialized in identifying hidden flaws had missed the fundamental instability in his own home. But unlike his professional projects, where he worked to prevent collapse, this structure of lies deserved to fall. That evening, Jeffrey maintained his normal routine with mechanical precision. He sat through dinner, watching Annie play her role of devoted wife. She asked about his trip, smiled at appropriate moments, and gave no indication that she'd spent the afternoon plotting the destruction of their marriage. The children carried on their usual evening activities. Michael worked on college applications, the weight of his mother's revelation evident in his slightly strained interactions. Emma practiced her violin, the melancholic notes taking on new meaning in light of the afternoon's discoveries. Nathan argued about his bedtime, his teenage defiance masking an innocence about to be shattered. Jeffrey observed them all with new clarity. He could see Walter's features reflected in their faces, details he dismissed over the years as coincidental similarities to Annie's side of the family. The knowledge didn't diminish his love for them, but it highlighted the calculated nature of the deception. Later that night, after the house had fallen silent, Jeffrey sat alone in his study. The structural engineer who'd built his career on ensuring things didn't fall apart now faced the ultimate integrity test. Annie and Walter had spent 18 years constructing their perfect deception. They believed their plan was flawless, their timing impeccable. But they'd made a critical miscalculation. They'd mistaken Jeffrey's dedication for weakness, his trust for blindness, his love for his family as a lever they could use against him. The man who'd earned his success by anticipating and preventing structural failures was now uniquely qualified to orchestrate one. The next morning, Jeffrey rose early as usual. He kissed Annie goodbye, accepted her practiced smile, and drove to his office. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. The respected structural engineer was simply beginning another day of ensuring buildings stood strong and true. But beneath his calm exterior, Jeffrey's mind worked with cold precision. Annie and Walter had built their plans on the assumption that he would play the role of devoted husband right until their moment of triumph. They expected him to continue working, adding to the assets they planned to seize, maintaining the life they intended to steal. They would learn too late that underestimating Jeffrey Anderson was the fatal flaw in their design. The man they dismissed as predictable and blindly trusting was about to show them exactly how dangerous such assumptions could be. The magnitude of their betrayal, 18 years of marriage, 3 children, countless moments of fabricated happiness, might have broken a lesser man. But Jeffrey had built his career on understanding how things fell apart precisely so he could prevent it. This time, he would use that knowledge for a different purpose. Annie and Walter's scheme, years in the making, rested on Jeffrey's ignorance and their control of the narrative. They'd planned every detail, manipulated every relationship, and prepared for every contingency except one. The possibility that their target would discover their plan before they could spring their trap. That evening, Jeffrey watched Annie check her phone repeatedly, no doubt exchanging messages with Walter about their approaching victory. She had no idea that her careful plans were about to face a structural integrity test they couldn't possibly pass. The price of their betrayal would be calculated not in years of deception, but in the totality of their failure. Jeffrey Anderson, the man they judged too trusting and preoccupied with his work, was about to teach them the true cost of underestimating him. The methodical nature that made Jeffrey Anderson an exceptional structural engineer now drove his response to Annie's betrayal. For 2 weeks, he maintained an outward facade of normalcy while meticulously dismantling the elaborate deception his wife and Walter had constructed. His first step was accessing the family's financial records. Sitting in his home office late at night, Jeffrey discovered a pattern of transactions that confirmed the depth of their duplicity. Small amounts transferred from joint accounts over years had accumulated into a substantial hidden fund. "Quite clever, Annie," he muttered, examining the bank statements. "Death by 1,000 cuts." The next morning, Jeffrey received a call from his bank's fraud department. "Mr. Anderson, we've noticed some unusual patterns in your joint accounts," the representative said. "Yes, I imagine you have," Jeffrey replied. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with Bradley Morton today, if possible." Bradley, the branch manager, had handled Jeffrey's accounts for over a decade. His face grew increasingly grave as Jeffrey presented the evidence of Annie's systematic theft. "This is highly irregular, Jeffrey. These transfers have been going on for years. Precisely why I'm here, Bradley. I need complete records of every transaction. Can you help me with that?" "Of course, but..." Bradley hesitated. "Given the pattern, we should discuss protecting your remaining assets." Jeffrey's smile held no warmth. "My thoughts exactly." Later that week, Jeffrey discovered emails between Annie and Walter discussing their plans. The password to Annie's laptop, Nathan's birthday, proved that arrogance had made them careless. The messages revealed years of coordinated deception. From awiley@medcenter.com to annia75@email.com. Subject, next week. Everything's set for your appointment next Tuesday. Jeffrey's Detroit trip gives us plenty of time. The kids' medical records are secure. No one will ever question the paternity. Your husband's too busy with his precious buildings to notice what's right in front of him. Jeffrey downloaded everything, maintaining his digital forensics with the same precision he applied to structural analysis. Each piece of evidence was cataloged, dated, and backed up securely. A discreet inquiry to his professional network led him to Salvador Emery, a divorce attorney known for handling complex cases with ruthless efficiency. They met in Salvador's downtown office, away from prying eyes. "Tell me everything," Salvador said, his office overlooking the courthouse Jeffrey had helped design. Jeffrey laid out the evidence methodically: financial records, emails, medical documentation. Salvador's eyebrows rose progressively higher. "They've been thorough," the lawyer admitted, "but arrogant. That's good for us. Arrogant people make mistakes." "I want to protect the children first," Jeffrey stated. "They're not mine biologically, but..." Salvador held up a hand. "They're yours in every way that matters. We'll set up trust funds, ironclad ones. Annie won't be able to touch a cent. She and Walter have been spreading rumors," Jeffrey continued, "painting me as emotionally unavailable, hinting at abuse. Classic groundwork for a sympathy play." Salvador nodded. "But it won't work. Your reputation, your records, your consistent presence in your children's lives. It all works in our favor." Over the next few days, Jeffrey noticed changes in Annie's behavior. She took more private calls, scheduled urgent meetings with Walter, watched Jeffrey with poorly concealed suspicion. "Is everything all right?" she asked one evening, her tone probing. "You seem different." Jeffrey looked up from his laptop, where he'd been reviewing trust fund documents. "Just focused on work, dear. The usual." Annie's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You work too hard. Maybe you should take some time off." "After Michael's graduation," Jeffrey replied, watching her suppress a flinch at the mention of their planned moment of triumph. The next day, Walter called Jeffrey's office. "Jeff, it's been too long." Walter's voice oozed false friendship. "Annie mentioned you seemed stressed. Why don't you come in for a checkup?" "I appreciate the concern, Walter," Jeffrey replied coolly, "but I'm perfectly healthy." The call confirmed Jeffrey's suspicions. They were accelerating their timeline. That evening, he overheard Annie on the phone with Walter. "He knows something's wrong," she hissed. "We need to move faster." "Calm down." Walter's voice came through clearly on Jeffrey's recording device. "We've planned this for years. He can't prove anything. But what if? Annie, trust me. I've taken care of everything. The medical records, the paternity tests, our story. It's all perfect. Jeffrey's too straight-laced to fight dirty. Once we file the abuse claim, that's necessary? It's insurance. No judge will give him joint custody after domestic crime allegations. The children will side with you. They always do in these cases. Plus, it explains why you needed so many medical checkups over the years." Jeffrey smiled grimly as he added the recording to his evidence file. Their overconfidence was becoming their undoing. The next week, Annie and Walter made their move. Jeffrey received notice of a domestic crime complaint filed with the police. The accusations were cleverly crafted. No physical abuse, just emotional manipulation and controlling behavior that would be hard to disprove. But Jeffrey was prepared. He presented the police with meticulous records of his whereabouts during every alleged incident, along with evidence of Annie's affair and their conspiracy. Detective Sarah Chun reviewed the documentation with growing amazement. "This is comprehensive, Mr. Anderson. I'm an engineer, detective. Documentation is second nature." "The abuse claims seem retaliatory," she noted, "especially given the timing and these recordings." When Annie discovered the abuse allegations had been dismissed, she made her next desperate move. Jeffrey received an urgent call from Bradley Morton. "She's trying to empty the joint accounts," the banker reported. "All of them? Let me guess. Transfer to an account we've been tracking?" "Exactly. But as discussed, the accounts are frozen," Jeffrey finished. "Thank you, Bradley." That evening, Annie's mask finally cracked. She stormed into Jeffrey's study, face flushed with rage. "What did you do?" she demanded. Jeffrey looked up calmly. "You'll have to be more specific." "The accounts. I can't access our money." "Our money," Jeffrey repeated thoughtfully. Interesting choice of words, given the separate account you've been filling for years. Annie's face went pale. "You." "Me," Jeffrey agreed. The husband too busy with his precious buildings to notice what's right in front of him. "Isn't that how Walter phrased it? You've been spying on me?" "No, Annie. I've been protecting myself." "There's a difference." She recovered quickly, her lips curving into a cruel smile. "It doesn't matter. Once everything comes out about the children." "You mean the paternity that Walter helped you hide? The medical records he falsified? The conspiracy you've both documented so helpfully in emails?" Annie took a step back. "You're bluffing. Engineer, remember? I deal in facts, not bluffs. The children will hate you when they learn the truth." "The truth?" Jeffrey's voice remained steady. "The truth is that I've loved them, supported them, and been there for them their entire lives. The truth is that you and Walter plan to use them as pawns in your scheme. The truth, Annie, is that you've underestimated me for the last time." She fled the study, already dialing Walter's number. Jeffrey returned to his work, adding this conversation to his growing documentation. Annie and Walter had spent years building their perfect plan, but they'd failed to account for one crucial factor. They'd chosen the wrong man to betray. Salvador called the next morning. "They're getting desperate. Walter tried to access some of your medical records at the hospital. Let me guess, records that might support their abuse claims?" "Exactly. But the hospital's internal audit caught it. His unauthorized access has been logged and reported." Jeffrey nodded, adding this development to his files. "They're making mistakes. Big ones," Salvador agreed. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Jeffrey replied, and meant it. "Everything's proceeding according to plan." The following days saw Annie and Walter growing increasingly frantic. Their carefully constructed scheme was unraveling thread by thread. Every move they made was anticipated and countered. Every attempt to salvage their plan only provided Jeffrey with more evidence. Their mutual friends, sensing something was wrong, began asking questions. Annie's attempts to maintain her narrative of Jeffrey's emotional abuse fell apart under the weight of years of contradictory evidence. Walter's professional reputation took its first hits as rumors of his ethical breaches began circulating in medical circles. Jeffrey watched it all with the detached interest of an engineer observing a controlled demolition. Each desperate action by Annie and Walter weakened their position further. Their dream of escaping with Jeffrey's assets and reputation intact was crumbling, and they had no one to blame but themselves. As the 2 weeks drew to a close, Jeffrey had everything in place. The trust funds for the children were established and secured. His assets were protected. The evidence was organized and documented. Annie and Walter's attempts to seize control had been thwarted at every turn. They had spent 18 years constructing their deception. Jeffrey had needed only 14 days to dismantle it completely. Now all that remained was to wait for the perfect moment to bring their entire scheme crashing down around them. The morning of Michael's high school graduation dawned bright and clear. Jeffrey Anderson stood in his kitchen at 5 a.m., methodically arranging documents on the marble countertop. The DNA test results lay beside the divorce papers, each page a nail in the coffin of Annie's carefully constructed deception. Salvador Emery had already filed the divorce papers the previous day, ensuring everything was legally in motion before the reveal. The grounds were clear: adultery and fraud spanning nearly 2 decades. The documentation was exhaustive, leaving no room for contest or denial. Everything's in place, Salvador had confirmed during their final meeting. The trust funds are ironclad. Each child's education and future are secured, completely separate from the divorce proceedings. Jeffrey placed 3 sealed envelopes beside the documents, each bearing the name of one of his children. The letters inside contained everything they needed to understand: bank statements showing Annie's systematic theft, email exchanges between her and Walter plotting their deception, medical records revealing Walter's manipulation of paternity information, and most importantly, Jeffrey's own words to each child. To Michael, he wrote about pride, not in academic achievements or athletic victories, but in the young man's growing sense of integrity. He included proof of the college trust fund, ensuring his eldest wouldn't have to compromise his future. Emma's letter acknowledged her passion for music and art, traits Annie had always dismissed as impractical. Jeffrey had established a separate fund for her artistic pursuits, ensuring she could follow her dreams without financial constraint. For Nathan, the youngest, Jeffrey included tickets to the gaming convention they'd planned to attend, paid for and transferable. His letter emphasized that family wasn't about DNA but about choice and love. The sound of movement upstairs signaled the beginning of the day's choreographed destruction. Jeffrey had already removed his essential belongings from the house, leaving behind the trappings of the life Annie had planned to steal. Annie entered the kitchen first, already dressed for the graduation ceremony in an expensive dress bought with Jeffrey's money. She froze at the sight of the documents on the counter. "What's this?" Her voice wavered despite her attempt at authority. "The truth," Jeffrey replied simply, pushing the DNA results forward. "Though I suspect you're already familiar with it." Annie's face drained of color as she scanned the papers. "These are fake." "You can't." "Fake? Like the past 18 years of our marriage? Like Walter's medical records? Like your love? You don't understand." Annie's voice took on the manipulative tone she perfected over years. "I did it for the children." "No," Jeffrey cut her off. "You did it for yourself. And now you can live with the consequences." Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced Michael's arrival. He entered the kitchen in his graduation robes, stopping short at the tension-filled scene. "Dad? Mom? What's going on?" "Your mother was just about to explain," Jeffrey said calmly. "About the paternity tests. About her plans for after your graduation. About Walter." Michael's face showed recognition. He'd carried the weight of his mother's revelation for weeks. Annie turned to him desperately. "Michael, honey, you don't understand. Your father is trying to—" "To what, Mom?" Michael's voice was hard. "To expose what you told me? About how none of us are his kids. About taking his money after graduation?" Emma and Nathan appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock as they saw the documents spread across the counter. "There are letters for each of you," Jeffrey said, gesturing to the envelopes. "Everything is explained inside, along with proof. The choice of what to do with that information is yours." Annie lunged for the papers, but Jeffrey had anticipated this. Copies were already safely stored with Salvador, and digital versions were secured in multiple locations. You can't do this. Annie's composure cracked. Walter, and you have lost, Jeffrey stated flatly. The divorce papers are filed. Your secret accounts are frozen. The trust funds for the children are beyond your reach. Annie's phone buzzed. Walter, right on schedule. Jeffrey allowed himself a small smile as she answered. Walter? They know. He knows everything. She listened, her face contorting. What do you mean your privileges are suspended? How can they? The medical board? Jeffrey watched his children read their letters, their worlds shifting on their axes. Emma's hands trembled as she read about her mother's deception. Nathan's jaw clenched at the revelations about Walter. I've transferred ownership of my company's shares to a protected trust, Jeffrey announced, his voice carrying the same precision he used in engineering presentations. The house mortgage has been reassigned. Your credit cards will be deactivated by noon. You can't just leave us with nothing. Annie shrieked. Nothing? Jeffrey's voice was ice. Like what you planned for me. At least I've ensured the children are provided for. That's more than you and Walter intended to do with my assets. The doorbell rang. Salvador Emery, right on time. Annie's face showed the first traces of fear as the lawyer entered, carrying additional documentation. Mrs. Anderson, Salvador said formally, I have some papers requiring your immediate attention. What followed was a systematic dismantling of Annie's carefully constructed future. Salvador detailed the legal consequences of her actions, the fraud, the financial theft, the conspiracy with Walter. Each point was supported by irrefutable evidence. Jeffrey watched Annie's desperate attempts to salvage control, to twist the narrative, to paint herself as the victim. But the documentation was too thorough, the evidence too damning. The children need me, she tried. A last desperate plea. No, Mom, Michael spoke, his voice firm. We needed the truth. Dad gave us that, along with a choice. Emma and Nathan stood with their brother, their unity a silent testimony to Jeffrey's years of genuine parenting versus Annie's manipulation. I'll be leaving now, Jeffrey announced. The letters explain everything else you need to know. The trust funds are active, your educations and futures are secure. He turned to Annie. Goodbye, Annie. Walter's probably waiting for your call. Though I suspect his support might be somewhat diminished now that your plans have fallen apart. As Jeffrey walked out of the house for the last time, he heard Annie's phone ring again. Her conversation with Walter confirmed everything. Their perfect plan was in ruins, their reputations shattered, their futures uncertain. The aftermath unfolded exactly as Jeffrey had orchestrated. Annie and Walter's attempts to contest the divorce failed against the mountain of evidence. Their mutual friends, presented with proof of their decades-long deception, turned away in disgust. Walter's medical license came under intense scrutiny when his falsification of medical records came to light. His privileged position, used to help hide his affair and manipulate paternity records, became the instrument of his downfall. Jeffrey didn't stay to watch the collapse. He had planned a complete departure. New city, new opportunities, new life. His revenge wasn't in destroying Annie and Walter's plans. It was in rising above their betrayal while ensuring they faced the consequences of their choices. The graduation ceremony proceeded as scheduled, though with a very different outcome than Annie had planned. Instead of being her moment of triumph, it became the public beginning of her downfall. Later that day, Salvador called to confirm the final details. Everything's proceeding as planned. Annie's attempts to access the accounts have been blocked. Walter's lawyer is already trying to negotiate. No negotiations, Jeffrey replied firmly. They chose their path. Now they can walk it. The trust funds he'd established would ensure his children's futures remain secure. The letters he'd left would ensure they understood the truth. His departure would ensure Annie and Walter faced the full impact of their actions without him there to blame or manipulate. News spread quickly through their social circle. Annie's careful narrative of Jeffrey's emotional distance crumbled in the face of evidence showing her long-term deception. Walter's professional reputation, built over decades, collapsed under the weight of his ethical violations. Jeffrey's final act was to send an email to their mutual friends, attaching key pieces of evidence that exposed the full scope of Annie and Walter's betrayal. He didn't need to embellish or explain. The facts spoke for themselves. As his plane took off that evening, Jeffrey reflected on the precision of his response to their betrayal. Annie and Walter had spent 18 years constructing their deception, planning to take everything he'd built. Instead, they would spend years facing the consequences of their choices, while the children they'd used as pawns would have the freedom to choose their own paths. The structural engineer who'd built his career on ensuring things stood strong had orchestrated the perfect controlled demolition of his marriage, ensuring that only the guilty parties would be caught in the collapse. 4 years passed like blueprints through Jeffrey Anderson's hands, precise, measured, each detail in its place. Seattle had proven the perfect location to rebuild his life. The city's perpetual rain and soaring skyscrapers matched his methodical nature, and his reputation as a structural engineer had only grown stronger. His corner office at Wilson and Anderson Engineering overlooked the city he'd helped reshape. 3 major projects bore his signature: a revolutionary earthquake-resistant hospital, a sustainable corporate headquarters, and a bridge that local newspapers called a work of art. The morning Michael found him, Jeffrey was reviewing plans for his newest project. His secretary's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Anderson, there's a young man here to see you. He says his name is Michael." Jeffrey's hand stilled over the blueprints. He'd known this day might come. He'd left enough breadcrumbs in his carefully crafted exit for his children to follow if they chose to. "Send him in, Claire." Michael entered, taller than Jeffrey remembered, carrying himself with the confidence of a college senior. His features, so like Walter's, had matured, but his eyes held the same integrity Jeffrey had always seen in them. "You weren't easy to find," Michael said, standing just inside the door. "That wasn't the point," Jeffrey replied, gesturing to a chair. "The point was that you could find me if you wanted to." Michael sat, studying the man who'd raised him. Mom lost everything. The house, her friends, her reputation. All of it. And Walter? A bitter smile crossed Michael's face. Left her the moment the divorce settlement came through. Turns out his love was as fake as hers. Jeffrey nodded, unsurprised. "And your siblings?" "Emma's thriving at art school. The trust fund you set up made that possible. Nathan's finishing high school, top of his class in computer science. We all read the letters. We understood why you left." The silence between them held years of unspoken words. Jeffrey waited, letting Michael find his voice. "Mom lives in a 1-bedroom apartment now, works at Marshall's folding clothes. She tries to contact us constantly, begging for forgiveness, saying she's changed." Michael's voice hardened. "None of us want anything to do with her." "That's your choice to make," Jeffrey said. "I made sure you'd have that freedom." Walter's medical license was suspended, Michael continued. The review board found more cases of falsified records. His wife left him, took half of everything. Last I heard, he moved to Arizona to start over. Jeffrey's expression remained neutral. The fate of his betrayers meant nothing to him now. "Your mom told us you were emotionally distant," Michael said, leaning forward, "that you cared more about your buildings than us. But you're the one who made sure we were taken care of, who gave us the truth, who let us choose our own paths." "DNA doesn't make a father," Jeffrey replied simply. Michael pulled out his phone, showing pictures of Emma's art exhibitions and Nathan's robotics competitions. "We've been keeping track of your projects too. That hospital design in Portland? Nathan says it's brilliant." The conversation flowed easier after that. Michael shared stories of college life, his plans for graduate school, the ways he and his siblings had supported each other through the aftermath of their parents' deception. "Emma and Nathan want to see you," Michael said finally. "When you're ready. They understand if you don't." "I'd like that," Jeffrey cut in. The children he'd raised choosing to return to him meant more than any victory over Annie and Walter. Over the next few months, Emma and Nathan visited separately. Each meeting healed another piece of what Annie and Walter had tried to destroy. Emma, her artistic soul wrapped in quiet strength, brought photos of her installations. "The trust fund changed everything," she told him. "Mom always said art was a waste of time, that I needed to be practical like her. But you believed in me even after." "I believed in you because of who you are," Jeffrey replied. "That hasn't changed." Nathan, nearly as tall as Jeffrey now, talked technology and engineering with the enthusiasm Jeffrey remembered. Your letter helped me understand what integrity really means, he said during one visit. Watching Mom and Walter fall apart, seeing how their lies caught up with them, it taught me what not to be. Their mother's attempts to re-enter their lives became a constant background noise they all ignored. Annie's calls, texts, and emails painted a picture of a desperate woman facing the consequences of her choices. She showed up at my dorm, Emma reported during one visit. Said she was a changed person, that she'd learned her lesson. But all I could think about was how she and Walter plotted to take everything from you. Nathan's encounter with his mother at a grocery store revealed how far she'd fallen. She was wearing a marshal's uniform, looked so different from the woman who used to host dinner parties and plan our lives. She tried to hug me, started crying when I walked away. Jeffrey's success grew with each passing year. His firm's reputation for innovation and integrity attracted major clients across the country. The irony wasn't lost on him. While Annie folded clothes and Walter rebuilt his practice in Arizona, Jeffrey's wealth and influence had multiplied. Your mother keeps trying to friend me on social media, Claire, his secretary, mentioned one day. Should I block her? She's not worth the effort, Jeffrey replied. Let her see what she lost. The children's visits became more frequent. Family dinners at Jeffrey's penthouse apartment replaced the forced gatherings of their past. They built new traditions, stronger for being chosen rather than obligated. Michael brought his fiancée to meet Jeffrey first, before any other family. You're the one whose opinion matters, he explained. Emma sought Jeffrey's advice about gallery showings and commissions. Nathan called to discuss engineering concepts and career choices. The family they rebuilt wasn't bound by DNA, but by something far more powerful: truth, respect, and conscious choice. Annie's betrayal had cost her everything she'd schemed to obtain, while Jeffrey's integrity had given him something far more valuable than what he'd lost. Do you ever regret how thoroughly you destroyed their plans? Michael asked during one evening, watching the Seattle sunset from Jeffrey's balcony. Jeffrey considered the question. Regret would imply they deserved mercy. Your mother and Walter spent 18 years plotting to take everything I built, using my love for you three as a weapon. They earned every consequence. The children understood. They'd seen firsthand how betrayal masquerading as love could destroy foundations thought unshakable. More importantly, they'd witnessed how integrity and strength could build something even stronger from the ruins. Annie's desperate attempts at contact continued through the years, each ignored with the same finality as Jeffrey's execution of his revenge. Her messages spoke of loneliness, of regret, of a changed heart, words as empty as her promises had been. Mom's getting desperate, Emma reported after another failed attempt at reconciliation. She actually suggested family counseling, said we could all heal together. Jeffrey's response was characteristically direct. Healing implies she has something worth saving. She made her choice 18 years ago. Now she can live with it. The contrast between their lives grew starker with each passing year. While Jeffrey's firm expanded to new cities and his children flourished in their chosen paths, Annie's world remained confined to her small apartment and retail job. Walter, rebuilding a modest practice in Arizona, had remarried but lost that family too when his past caught up with him. Your revenge wasn't anything you did to them, Nathan observed during one of their regular dinners. It was succeeding without them, being happy despite them, and letting them watch from the sidelines. Jeffrey smiled at his youngest's insight. The best revenge is building something they can never touch. As the years passed, Jeffrey's definition of success evolved. It wasn't measured in the buildings he designed or the wealth he accumulated, but in the family that chose to return to him. Michael's wedding, Emma's gallery openings, Nathan's graduation. Each milestone celebrated without Annie marked another victory of substance over deception. The family photographs in Jeffrey's office told the new story: 3 children who chose truth over convenience, integrity over betrayal, and a father who earned their love through actions rather than biology. Annie's betrayal had cost her everything she valued, while Jeffrey's principles had given him something far more precious: a family bound by choice rather than obligation. His revenge wasn't in the calculated destruction of Annie and Walter's plans, but in the peace and success he found without them, and in the love his children chose to give him even after learning the truth. The price of betrayal had been everything Annie held dear, while the reward for integrity was a family stronger than blood. Epilogue. 10 years after Jeffrey Anderson's masterful dismantling of Annie and Walter's scheme, the consequences of their betrayal continued to shape their lives in ways they never anticipated. Annie Morgan, she'd reverted to her maiden name after even Walter abandoned her, still worked the evening shift at Marshall's. Her small one-bedroom apartment in the less desirable part of Rochester stood in stark contrast to the life she'd once planned to steal. The designer clothes and luxury cars had been replaced by clearance rack outfits and bus passes. Her attempts to rebuild her social standing had failed spectacularly. Former friends who'd once attended her lavish dinner parties now crossed the street to avoid her. The county club membership had been revoked after the truth about her affair with Walter emerged. Her weekly routine consisted of folding clothes, stocking shelves, and watching through social media as her children celebrated life's milestones without her. "Did you see the photos from Michael's daughter's christening?" she asked her only remaining friend, a fellow retail worker, during their lunch break. "Jeffrey was there. He's a grandfather now, and I wasn't even told about the pregnancy." Walter Wiley's fall proved equally spectacular. After the medical board suspended his license in Rochester, his attempt to rebuild in Arizona crumbled when his past caught up with him. His second wife left after discovering his history of deception, taking half of his already diminished assets. Now in his early 60s, Walter ran a small medical consultation business in Phoenix, his practice limited to reviewing files rather than treating patients. His reputation, once sterling, carried an asterisk that no amount of time seemed to erase. The medical board's investigation had revealed other ethical breaches beyond falsifying the Anderson children's records, suggesting a pattern of professional misconduct that spanned his entire career. Dr. Wiley's recommendations will be taken under advisement became the standard response from hospitals and insurance companies, code for his opinion carrying little weight. Meanwhile, Jeffrey's empire had grown beyond even his careful planning. Wilson and Anderson Engineering now had offices in 6 major cities, with Jeffrey's innovative designs reshaping skylines across the country. His memoir, Building on Integrity, A Structural Engineer's Journey, became required reading in engineering programs, though it never mentioned Annie or Walter by name. The children's lives reflected the strength of choosing truth over convenience. Michael, now a successful corporate lawyer, had married Sarah, a pediatric surgeon. Their daughter, Claire, became the center of Jeffrey's world. He designed and built them a home that architectural magazines featured as a perfect blend of form and function. Emma's artistic career flourished. Her installations, exploring themes of truth, deception, and chosen family, showed in galleries worldwide. She'd found love with Rebecca, a gallery curator who understood the power of art to heal old wounds. Jeffrey walked her down the aisle at their wedding, while Annie learned about it through a local newspaper article. Nathan followed in Jeffrey's footsteps, but in his own way. His software company specialized in structural analysis programs, combining his father's engineering precision with his passion for technology. He married his college sweetheart, Maria, and their twin boys spent weekends in Jeffrey's workshop, learning about building things that last. The annual Anderson family gatherings at Jeffrey's Seattle penthouse became legendary in their social circle. Children, spouses, and now grandchildren celebrated holidays and milestones, their bonds stronger for being chosen rather than merely inherited. Annie's Christmas cards to her children, sent faithfully each year, remained unopened before being discarded. Her attempts to contact her grandchildren through social media were blocked. The trust funds Jeffrey established had ensured that neither she nor Walter could ever use money as leverage to regain access to the family. "Your mother was at the mall again," Sarah told Michael one evening. She tried to approach Claire. "Did she tell you what happened to her real grandmother?" Michael had asked, referring to Jeffrey's mother, who'd become the loving grandmother Annie could never be. Walter's third marriage dissolved after his new wife discovered his pattern of infidelity. His adult children from his first marriage, learning of his betrayal of the Andersons, cut contact. His medical consultation business barely covered his alimony payments, and his attempts to publish in medical journals were met with polite rejections. Karma, as Emma observed during one family dinner, doesn't need help when truth does its work. The mutual friends who'd initially believed Annie's lies about Jeffrey's emotional distance now sought his advice on business and personal matters. His reputation for integrity and strategic thinking had only grown stronger with time. Several had invested in his firm, their faith rewarded by his consistent success. Jeffrey's relationship with his children deepened with each passing year. He became the confidant they turned to for major life decisions, the grandfather who never missed a recital or game, the father who showed them that character trumped biology. The family photographs in his office told the story of triumph over betrayal. Michael's law school graduation, Emma's first solo show, Nathan's company launch. Each image captured a moment of success built on the foundation of truth Jeffrey had laid. Annie watched this happiness from the periphery of social media and local news coverage. Her small apartment's walls held photos of the children from before the revelation, frozen in time like her dreams of the life she tried to steal. Walter, reduced to consulting from a home office in Phoenix, sometimes Googled his former medical practice, now a thriving clinic under new ownership. His medical license remained permanently restricted, his name a cautionary tale in ethics seminars. Neighborhood children still pointed out Annie at the Marshall store, whispering about the woman who lost everything because of her lies. She'd aged beyond her years, the stress of her downfall etched into her face. The designer anti-aging creams had been replaced by drugstore brands, her salon visits by home dye kits. Jeffrey, in contrast, had grown distinguished with age. His success attracted attention from younger women, but he remained focused on his family and work. His reputation as one of the nation's premier structural engineers was matched only by his standing as a devoted father and grandfather. "How do you feel about Mom now?" Nathan asked during one family gathering, watching his twins play with their cousins. "I don't," Jeffrey replied simply. "She's not worth the energy of feeling anything." The price of betrayal had been complete. Annie and Walter had lost not just their material comforts and social standing, but the very things they tried to steal: family, respect, and peace. Their punishment wasn't in any single action Jeffrey had taken, but in the daily reminder of all they'd thrown away. The legacy of their betrayal served as a reminder that true family transcended biology, that integrity outlasted deception, and that the most devastating revenge was living well in plain sight of those who tried to destroy you. Jeffrey Anderson's greatest victory wasn't in the buildings he designed or the wealth he accumulated, but in the family that chose him, the respect he maintained, and the peace he found in knowing that justice sometimes worked exactly as designed. For Annie Morgan and Walter Wiley, the real punishment wasn't in losing their material possessions or social status, but in watching from the sidelines as the family they tried to destroy thrived without them, bound together by something stronger than the lies they'd thought would never be discovered. The price of betrayal, it turned out, was paid not just in lost assets and opportunities, but in the daily recognition that some choices carried consequences that no amount of time could erase.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.